Everything you love was once a project. The apps you tap, the bridges you cross, the shows you stream. None of them happened by accident. Behind every one of them was a dream, a team, and a project manager trying to hold it all together. I'm Rick Morris, and this is AI Driven PM, the show where project managers stop playing games, embrace reality, and use AI to make dreams come true without burning out their people. Each week, we'll blend real world project war stories with practical ways to put AI to work. How to plan smarter, negotiate better dates, protect your team, and focus on the work that actually moves the needle. If you ever thought there has to be a better way to do this, then you're in the right place. Let's get to work. This is AI Driven PM. Welcome to episode 11 of AI Driven PM. I'm Rick Morris, and I'm super excited to bring you another agent that I've been dreaming of for many years. Last episode, we talked about Aria, how she protects you from risk by turning your organization's project history into a living database. Risk management grounded in evidence, not gut feel. Today, we're flipping to the front end of the project lifecycle because before you can manage risk, you have to commit to a number, a scope, a timeline, a price. You have to build an estimate. And if you've been in professional services or a project manager for more than 5 minutes, you know nothing haunts you like a bad estimate. Get it wrong, and you've made a commitment you can't keep. You've set expectations you can't meet, and 6 months later, you're explaining to your leadership why you're over budget or behind schedule, or why the client is upset. So let me introduce you to Atlas, the estimation engine. This is how we build estimates now, and this is how we make sure they hold up. Let's talk about why estimation is so hard and why it matters so much. In project management, we deal with uncertainty, scope that shifts, requirements that clarify over time, teams that perform differently than you expected, risks that materialize. But many times estimation is a commitment. You're not just building a plan, you're making a promise to a stakeholder. For this price, in this time frame, we will deliver this outcome. And here's the brutal part. You're making that promise at the moment you know the least about the project, before discovery, before requirements are locked, sometimes before you even know who's going to be on the team. Remember when you were caught in the hallway and asked for a quick estimate? They even said, hey, I won't hold you to it. But whatever you said made it in as a line item in the budget. And guess what? You were held to it. So how do most organizations estimate? Well, they guess. They look at similar projects. They ask someone who's done this before. They apply a multiplier. Like last time it took 500 hours. So let's say 600 to be safe. They pad it a little. They round up. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But here's what kills me is that we have the data. We've delivered hundreds of projects. We know how long an implementation takes. We know how many hours a data migration requires. We know what roles you need and how long each phase runs. That knowledge exists. It's in old project files. It's in timesheets. It's in the heads of senior consultants. But it's not structured. It's not accessible, and it's definitely not consistent. So every time we estimate, we start from scratch. We're reinventing the wheel and we're introducing variance. One PM estimates high, another estimates low, and stakeholders get different numbers depending on who picks up the phone. That's the problem that Atlas solves. Atlas stands for, well, it doesn't stand for anything. It's named after the Titan who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders. Because in professional services or project management, nothing carries more weight than your estimate. Get it wrong, and the whole project collapses under it. So here's what Atlas does. Atlas maintains practice libraries, structured definitions of every service your organization delivers. Salesforce implementations, ERP deployments, data and analytics projects, custom development work, enterprise PMO engagements, any kind of project, every project you have. And for each one, Atlas knows the phases of work, the modules or components you deliver, the roles required at each phase, the hours each role typically works, and the variability, best case, most likely worst case. This isn't a guess. This is your organization's delivery history codified. And when a new opportunity comes in, a client wants a quote, a prospect sends an RFP, a stakeholder asks, how much would this cost? Atlas guides you through a structured conversation, module by module, role by role, phase by phase. And then at the end, Atlas produces a 3-scenario estimate using the same PERT methodology that ARIA uses for risk. Optimistic, where everything goes right, minimal rework, team performs at peak efficiency. Most likely, the realistic scenario, some rework, normal team performance, or pessimistic, where everything can go wrong or the team has a learning curve. Atlas calculates the weighted expected value, the number you should plan against, and generates a fully formula-driven Excel workbook. Not static numbers, a living model. Change the team size, adjust the rates, add a module, remove a phase, and everything recalculates automatically. And it's presentation ready the moment it's generated. Now you might be thinking, Rick, we already have templates. We already have historical data. Why do we need AI for this? And that's a fair question. Of course, we've been doing it this way forever, right? But here's the difference. Your templates are static. They're a starting point, sure, but every time you use one, you're manually adjusting it. You're copying and pasting from old estimates. You're hoping you remember to update all the formulas. You're trying to recall what you did differently last time. And your historical data, it's locked in old project files. You have to go dig through timesheets, compare actuals to estimates, figure out where the variance came from. That takes hours, so you just don't do it. We just estimate based on muscle memory. But Atlas is different because Atlas is dynamic and conversational. She doesn't just give you a template, she walks you through a decision tree. Are you including data migration? How many custom integrations are there? What's the team composition? Are they onshore, offshore, hybrid? Is training included? And as you answer, she's building the estimate in real time, pulling from a practice library, applying the right component definitions, scaling the effort based on your answers. And here's the kicker. Atlas has two modes. You have your standard workflow, where you already know the shape of the project. You step through setup, modules, team configuration, training. Atlas builds the estimate from the practice library and generates the workbook, structured, fast, and consistent every time. Or there's discovery mode where you don't know any of the numbers. You give Atlas the client requirements document or the RFP or the statement of work or whatever you have. She analyzes it, suggests component counts and team composition based on what she reads, and asks you to validate before building the model. In discovery mode, Atlas becomes a thinking partner, not just a calculator. And that's what makes Atlas different. Store your knowledge, and she applies it. Let me show you how Atlas is structured under the hood, because this isn't magic, this is discipline. At the core of Atlas is the practice library, a structured knowledge base of every service offering or project type that your organization delivers. Each practice library contains a service definition. What is this service? What problem does it solve for the client? What does delivery look like at a high level or medium level or bad level, right? Now, it has the phases. So every project has phases like discovery, planning, execution, closeout, hypercare. Each phase has a typical duration range and it's got key deliverables. And then there's modules and components. These are the building blocks of the project. So for instance, like a Salesforce implementation, modules might be Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, CPQ, custom integrations, data migration. Each module has a base effort estimate and complexity modifiers. Now you have your roles and rates. So what roles do you need? Like a project manager, solution architect, developer, business analyst, QA, change management lead. What's those blended rates for each role? And how many hours does each role typically work per phase or per module? And then it creates PERT scenarios. So for each module and each role, Atlas stores three effort estimates. You're optimistic, you're most likely, and you're pessimistic. These are based on historical actuals from completed projects. And then Atlas uses this to do the PERT methodology, which is optimistic plus 4 times your most likely plus pessimistic. Then it gets into assumptions and constraints, like what assumptions are in this estimate? What dependencies are there that could change this number? What's out of scope by default? And all of this is version controlled so that when you close a project and the actuals come in, you're updating the practice library. Your estimates get smarter over time. This is organizational learning, again, codified. So how does an estimate actually get built? So let's say a prospect comes in and they want a Dynamics 365 implementation. They want finance and operations modules, 200 users, a hybrid team, 9-month timeline. You open a conversation with Atlas and tell her, hey, I need to build an estimate for a D365 F&O implementation. Atlas then will load the D365 practice library and start asking questions. So, what's the project name and client? What's the planned start date? What's the duration? What modules are included? All these different things that are going to help you answer it and create an estimate. So you answer like finance, operations, supply chain management. And I'll say, hey, for the finance module, like what's the complexity level? Like standard, moderate, complex? How many custom workflows are there? Is there a data migration from which the source system is? And you answer based on the RFP or discovery call notes. Then I'll ask you about your team configuration, like what's the team composition, onshore, offshore, hybrid? How many developers do you need per sprint? Is a dedicated change management lead included? And then Atlas suggests defaults based on the modules that you selected, but you can override those. And I'll ask you about training. Is the end user training included? How many users? Is it on-site? Is it virtual? And again, Atlas suggests based on best practice, and then you validate. At each step, Atlas is building the model. She's calculating effort per phase, per role, per module. She's applying the PERT formula to account for uncertainty. And she's rolling up the total hours, multiplying by rates, adding contingency. And when you're done, she generates the workbook. So I can go on and on and on about everything that Atlas does, or I can just show you, and I'm going to show you some live examples. But first, I'm going to take a quick break, let Centric Consulting say hello to you, and we'll be back on the other side to show you some of the outputs of this amazing agent, Atlas.
In today's economy, leaders are looking for a different kind of consulting partner. A partner that will work with you to understand your culture, technology, and employees. A partner that will develop the solutions you need, not the solutions they know best. For us, it's never been about simply checking a box. Since we were founded in 1999, Centric Consulting has established a reputation for solving its clients' toughest problems by delivering flexible, tailored, cost-efficient solutions, all centered on the right outcomes for each business. It's all part of our mission to deliver an unmatched experience you won't get anywhere else. Centered on what's best for you, Centric is ready to guide you on the journey ahead.
And we're back. And again, thank you to Centric Consulting for supporting AI-driven PM and continuing to bring this content to you. Now, before I get into this demo, I do want to talk to you about some learning that I've been on as well. As I've been working with agents and working with AI, I've learned that I've become constrained by my own thinking. So when I built Atlas originally, it was around these practice libraries. But when I started to branch out and start thinking about some different areas, I realized that the practice libraries somewhat constrains us, meaning when I started to try to build these estimators, I used to build these by hand in Excel, and I would try to, use all of our consulting practices, and it became a constraining model because I would have to try to account for everything that possibly could go wrong in a template or all the different possibilities. And when you have multiple practices and different ways to do things, it quickly became untenable. So it's one of those things that I've struggled with for many, many years in trying to apply this pricing methodology. But what became clear is that AI could actually clear all of that because we could interview it up front and remove those constraints. And so I want to show you in this demo exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to walk you through, this is actually a real thing. We've normalized or anonymized the data, but in this case, we do have a practice library. It was a Salesforce implementation, and we just finished working with the client where we had over 500 requirements that were given to the client, and now it was time to quote those. And we start to get into that, like if you think about taking a team, you're requirement by requirement to figure out, how long or how much this is going to cost. That's where we would get constrained quite a bit. And so I had a thought with Atlas. I was like, you know what? Before we do this, Atlas is aware of the practice library. It's aware of all this. Why don't we, instead of trying to supply counts to Atlas, Atlas helps suggest it. And so I put Atlas in front of the component counting and made this a two-phase thing. And I want to show you the results because it was really spectacular. So what I'm showing you right now is an output from Atlas. This isn't the Atlas estimate yet. This is after we ran 500 requirements through it so it could do the count. And so what it did is it took this summary by solution, this requirements by solution we actually gave to Atlas and was like, these are all the requirements that we have. Then what it would do is actually started to go through the requirements estimation. So it's completely aware of the practice library. And what I think is a core tenet of Atlas is that we have countable things. So for instance, when somebody goes, that's a process, we're going to do the APAR process. I actually count that as like the 11 processes that they really are. And what happens is if a 12th or 13th or 14th comes up, then that breaks the assumption. And that allows us to then talk with our stakeholder or sponsor or client to say, hey, listen, we anticipated 11 workflows. There's now 14. What do we want to do? Right. So it really becomes very focused. So what Atlas allows us to do is control the scope in price based on scope, based on these counts. And so the counts are very, very important. So what would happen is this count here, it went through and said, okay, I see the story name, the story details, and then it determined, hey, I think that's 4 data objects, 11 workflows, uh, 20 scripts, 13 reports, 23 custom fields, 2 custom records, so on and so forth. So it basically went through these estimates and started to count these different things. And then it would pull everything together up into these main counts that we then could go put into Atlas for the actual price. So now that I have all these counts, it really becomes interesting because how did it count? Why did Atlas count that? And how do we know those assumptions are correct? And this is where I'm really starting to see the shift in the way we're estimating. So imagine going through 500 requirements, line item by line item by line item by line item with architects and everything else. That's going to take forever, right? And a lot of times we don't have that amount of time. So that's where the guessing comes into play. But with Atlas, it went through and did all of this. And then I asked it, hey, Atlas, can you give me a document of all of your assumptions so that I can give that to the architects and they can come back and tell me what they agree with and what they don't agree with? And that's what made this available. So this is an output from Atlas telling me exactly how it came up with the estimates. It gave me the column definitions, what it considered a data object, what it considered a workflow or a PDF, what it considered a script, so on and so forth. Then it actually goes into each one of these things and gives it the general assumptions, how it looked at this integration architecture, these approval workflows, and then it actually went requirement by requirement or even grouping by regrouping to see exactly how it created that estimate. So I can now give this to the architects, and instead of starting from scratch, we can just go validate the assumptions. And of course, these assumptions probably have some inconsistencies. So what happens is I actually then record the meeting where I'm talking about this with architects, and then I feed that back through to recreate the estimate, which leads us to this sheet. This is actually the third revision of the sheet. And by the way, we got to this third revision in about an hour. So again, imagine going 500 requirements line item by line item, how long that takes. We actually ran all 500 requirements through, produced a rubric, took us about 20 minutes to go through that and guess at the assumptions. We came back then with some adjustments that we ran through. The second version that we got didn't take into economies of scale. So the team started telling me, they're like, well, Rick, yeah, it's counting everything, but there's certainly economies of scale. Like, even though there's 6 of these things occurring, sometimes we can do them all at once and sometimes we can't. Sometimes there's high complexity or less complexity. And so I kept asking the team to describe more. And as they did, I recorded that, fed that through, and gave us to this third version of this pricing here. Again, about an hour in a meeting that's taken this. So now you can see we've got our different rates. We've got, allocations. Here we start to say, okay, buy these modules like record to report, order to cash, integrations. This is about the percentage of time that a solutions architect would spend within that module. And then it gets even deeper. It was like, okay, within that, you've got data objects, workflows, scripts, reports, all of these things you have, if it's out of the box or, this 0.3, it's 20% out of the box, 50% of it's going to be light, 30% is going to be heavy. So it's about a weighted factor of 71%. And this here is kind of your heavy customization. So 8 hours best, 24 hours most likely, 80 hours is worst. And so you can see the adjusted numbers here based on this weighted factor. Now, this is a tremendous amount of data that to get us to a level of complexity, but also a level of certainty that's insane. Here too, you can see how it's estimating, the data object. It basically comes through here and says in data objects for this financial dimensions in the module of record to report, I'm counting 5, of these things, 5 data objects. And so it goes through, then gives you the detailed estimates. So it shows you literally the hours by requirement, pulls that up into this overall category, and it's telling you, hey, listen, for this project right now, we're telling you it's going to cost between 1.1 and 5.7 million dollars. But the PERT analysis of this, or our weighted average, says we expect this to come in at about 1.8. So again, this opens up a tremendous amount of questions. People start going, hey, why did you say 5.7 million dollars? You're like, that's great. Let me tell you why 5.7 million dollars. Meetings should take an hour, but sometimes they take threes. It should take us 8 hours to do this report, but based on, you know, how many times we go through it, it could take us 24 hours or 32 hours if things are wrong or you change the formatting or you weren't quite sure what you wanted. So the more certain you are going into it, then the more to that best case or most likely we are. The less certain you are, the more to the worst case. So you have total control of this. This pricing becomes insane. I've used PERT level pricing for 20 years. What I haven't been able to do is get to this level of complexity without AI. Now that I have detailed estimates and a pricing summary, I can then give you a timeline, right? And also an executive summary, which was really, really cool. And behind this summary also documents all of the key assumptions, the exclusions, the scope boundary protection that we're trying to put in there. All of these things that it's picking up as we're making adjustments, it's catching and putting into Atlas. It becomes an absolute insane workbook, especially when you can come back and show like, hey, imagine this conversation is, hey, how come we're running behind? Well, you're like, hey, we've had some scope difficulties. So like, what kind? And you go, I don't know, this, or this. Really, what I'm saying with Atlas is say, why are you behind? Well, we estimated 11 workflows and there were 17. And we're trying to absorb those as best we can, but we're running a little bit over. That difference, right, of knowing those exact numbers becomes insane when you start to have that conversation with a stakeholder, especially when things aren't going as well as you plan. And again, I could have stopped as a project manager and said, hey, we just saw 6 more workflows. Do we want to try to absorb those or not? So scope control becomes really, really, it's not based on subjective conversations anymore. It's based on objectionable answers or actual evidence and numbers that we have right here in Atlas. Coming back to this sheet and why PERT matters. Here's why the 3 scenario model is so powerful. When you give a client a single number, like this project costs $500,000, you've created a false sense of precision. But when you say the optimistic scenario is 1.1 million, pessimistic's 5.75 million, and the expected value is 1.8 million, you've communicated the uncertainty. You've set realistic expectations. You've built in a buffer and you've given yourself room to navigate if things go sideways. That's professional services or project management discipline. Let me give you another example. In this case, there was an RFP that came from a client and they asked for a high level price. And the organization did what they normally did. They kind of did a top down pricing model and said, here's how long we think it's going to cost. And there was really no structure from the client. And the client was accepting multiple bids. Well, once they got the bids, they saw a certain pricing the way they liked it and they wanted to do apples to apples. So on a Wednesday, we get notified, hey, we need to see the price in these types of modules. And they were purposefully vague. They were not saying all the things that they needed to say because they were trying to kind of play the procurement game that happens. And I'm sure several of you out there have been in this position before. And so we wanted to apply Atlas to that so that we could protect ourselves in the assumptions we made in trying to give somewhat of a fixed price back. And that's the whole reason why I built this estimator in the first place is that I would get asked for fixed cost pricing. And I didn't want to be that consultant that started as you try to give you the bottom level price I thought you would accept and then change request you to death. I wanted to have honest conversations up front. And so by fixing it to scope or somewhat creating of a price per activity, we were basically protecting the fixed price, but also, protected on both sides. The client was protected, we were protected. And that's where this really started. But Atlas has grown to a whole new level that I haven't even anticipated yet. So in this case, we had very vague requirements. We had a very high level price. And then we were asked to componentize it down to a specific format that they wanted. Now, again, this would normally take meeting after meeting after hours upon hours upon hours. What we did was we fed the RFP in, we then fed our estimate that we had done, and then we fed the request that the client made of having the price in these buckets. And then we started saying, hey, but we need to have assumptions counted so that we can go through and fix this to a point where we're protected on both sides. And this is what Atlas came up with. So it gave us this project name, came in here and gave us these team rates, gave us these different PERT risk parameters. And then this was like specifically like these line configurations. And so these line configurations had like automated machines and litmus controls and all these different things. And it was a lot of stuff I didn't understand, to be honest with you, but it absolutely understood it from an Atlas perspective. It went through and started to put people's names here, basically site configurations, all these different things that were going on. And then it gave us this training parameters. So then within here, it created a calculator and basically said, okay, by site, this is what we think is happening, and this is how many hours it's going to go. And then it was able to roll this up and put it into the actual format the client asked for. This wasn't our format, it was what the client asked for. However, the client just wanted a price. We're the ones that introduced the best case, most likely, and worst case, and then what our expected value was, what that average rate was, and were there going to be any kind of discounts. It then allowed us to build a resource sheet, and again created a ton of assumptions for us to be able to put into this workbook. So the future is now, and this is the loop that I've been talking about. And let's bring this all full circle. So last episode, we talked about Aria, how she protects you from risk by learning from your project history. And then this episode, we're showing you Atlas and how she builds estimates by applying your organizational knowledge. But there's one more level to Atlas here. Again, it's great to pull these spreadsheets together. It's great to put these counts in here and all that stuff, but we still need to make sure that we understand what it's doing. And that's where this powerful kind of output comes into play here, where it's like, okay, here's the model. Here's how you adjust it. Here's how you fix it. Because remember, each spreadsheet's fully formula driven, and that's generally your starter. Maybe the price is higher than you expected. Maybe we got some of the counts wrong. Well, we don't want to regenerate a whole spreadsheet. So Atlas's output is fully formulated ready, fully formula ready, so that when you actually adjust any of these numbers, it adjusts all the pricing and gets it there. It tells you the 3 levels of cost drivers it created. And remember, this is a specific format for this specific project. So it gives us the 8-person team, the resource design decisions, how it's applying a discount, where to change the rate. And then it goes through exactly how it actually came up with all of these different numbers. So you now can debate that and you have a great starting point. So you're not starting pricing from scratch, you're starting from a known point in which you can debate and talk about. All right, let's bring this full circle. Last episode, we talked about Aria, how she protects you from risk by learning from your project history. This episode, we showed you Atlas, how she builds estimates by applying your organizational knowledge systematically. But here's what ties them together, right? Atlas builds the estimate at the start. You commit to a scope, a timeline, a price, and that estimate becomes your baseline. Aria protects that estimate during execution. She monitors for risks that could blow it up. She flags issues early. She recommends contingency based on what actually happened on similar projects. But when that project closes, the loop completes. The actuals come in. You compare them to the estimate. You update the practice library. You feed the lessons learned to Aria's risk database. And then the next time you estimate, Atlas is smarter. And the next time you assess risk, Aria is smarter. That's organizational learning. That's how you get better at delivery over time. Not by hoping people remember, by encoding the knowledge into systems that don't forget. This is the transformation. Here's what this means for project managers. Estimation is very time consuming. It's high anxiety. You spend hours building a quote. You'd second guess every number, you pad it just to be safe, but not too much because you didn't want to lose the deal or have the stakeholder throw it out. And even after all that work, you'd still wonder, did I get it right? Atlas changes that. Estimation becomes fast, but also factual. 10 minutes instead of 4 hours. It becomes consistent. Every PM in your organization is pulling from the same practice library, applying the same methodology. No more variance based on who picked up the phone. And above all, it becomes defensible. You're not guessing. You're applying historical data, PERT methodology, and transparent formulas. That's the difference between hoping your estimate holds up and knowing it will. And that confidence, that changes how you show up in client conversations. You're not hedging. You're not apologizing for the number. You're saying, here's where it costs, here's why, and here's the math. That's authority. So on the next episode, we're looking at PACE, the predictability and capacity engine. ARIA and Atlas are about individual projects, protecting them, estimating them. PACE is about the portfolio. How predictable are your agile teams? How much readiness debt are they carrying? Are your sprint commitments holding up or are they sliding? PACE measures what most organizations ignore: execution discipline over time. We're going to walk through a real sprint report, actual client data, and show you where your degrading predictability looks like and how to fix it. Until then, let's go make some dreams come true. Really, really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you at episode 12 of AI Driven PM. I'm Rick Morris, and this has been AI Driven PM. Keep protecting your people, telling the truth, and making dreams come true.